is there something that Dr. Fauci or NIH is not being forthcoming about? Is there something that Dr. Fauci or NIH is not being forthcoming about?
Dr. Fauci, do you still support funding of the NIH funding of the lab in Wuhan?
Senator Paul, with all due respect, you are entirely and completely incorrect that the NIH has not ever and does not now fund gain-of-function research in the Wuhan Institute of Virology.
Do they fund Dr. Barrick?
We do not fund.
Do you fund Dr. Barrick's gain-of-function research?
Dr. Barrett does not doing gain-of-function research, and if it is, it's according to the guidelines, and it is being conducted in North Carolina, not
you don't think
in
inserting
China.
So do you still support sending money to the Wuhan Virology Institute?
We do not send money now to the Wuhan Virology Institute.
Do you support sending money? We did under your tutelage. We were sending it through EcoHealth. It was a sub-agency and a sub-grant. Do you support that the money from NIH that was going to the Wuhan Institute?
Let me explain to you why that was done. The SARS-CoV-1 originated in bats in China. It would have been irresponsible of us if we did not investigate the bat viruses and the serology to see who might have been infected.
Or perhaps it would be irresponsible to send it to the Chinese government that we may not be able to trust with this knowledge and with this incredibly dangerous viruses. Government scientists like yourself who favor gain-of-function research.
I don't favor gain-of-function research in China. You are saying things that are not correct.
So let's bring in now CNN political analyst Josh Rogin, columnist for The Washington Post. Josh, thanks for being with us. We're watching a conversation between members of the government, but also doctors. So let's start here with just a basic definition. Gain-of-function research and why this was the center of the questioning from Senator Paul.
Right. Well, there's an increasing number of lawmakers on both sides of the aisle, actually, who are trying to figure out if there was any basis for the theory that the pandemic that we're all in was related to an accident at one of these Wuhan labs that were studying bat coronaviruses. And part of that is to try to figure out what the relationships were between the Wuhan labs and the NIH and other American labs all over the country. And what's gain-of-function research, what that means is taking viruses from the wild and doing experiments that make them more dangerous. Now, what Dr. Fauci said very clearly is that what he doesn't think that the work that they were sponsoring in Wuhan qualifies as gain-of-function research. And what Rand Paul was saying is that he thinks it does and other scientists think it does. So if you take away the semantic debate really over what is gain-of-function or what is not gain-of-function, what's left is that the Senate and again, both parties are trying to look into the relationships between NIH and Dr. Fauci and these Wuhan labs, which Fauci admits exists. And we're getting caught up in this politics over gain-of-function research and what's not gain-of-function research. But the bottom line is that there are relationships there, and there's increasing calls for Fauci to disclose more information about them. And again, both parties are trying to look into the relationships between NIH and Dr. Fauci and these Wuhan labs, which Fauci admits exists. And we're getting caught up in this politics over gain-of-function research and what's not gain-of-function research. But the bottom line is that there are relationships there, and there's increasing calls for Fauci to disclose more information about them.
Okay, that's interesting, Josh. And of course, you're steeped in this. You have been reporting on this for a year. So that sounded to the rest of us like a kind of a wonky detour. But is there something that Dr. Fauci or NIH is not being forthcoming about? Is there something that Dr. Fauci or NIH is not being forthcoming about?
Well, yeah. Well, that's the question. So, you know, what's been alleged is that the oversight of this research that Dr. Fauci did sponsor through the EcoHealth Alliance, as he admitted, did not go through the proper oversight channels, okay? And that if it led to the pandemic that we're in, then Dr. Fauci and his team deserve some blame for supporting it. Now, whether or not you call that gain-of-function research, I think that's the question that these lawmakers are trying to get to. And I think on the one hand, it's a legitimate question, to be honest, Alisyn. On the other hand, I think they're also politicizing it. And that's really a tragedy because it's not a political question. You know, we need to find out how the pandemic started in order to prevent the next one. And if that means that we need to know more about the relationships between Fauci's NIAID and the NIH and these Wuhan labs, then so be it. It shouldn't really be about Fauci. It should be about getting to the truth. And yes, Dr. Fauci and Peter Daszak and the EcoHealth Alliance have been resisting these efforts, various efforts, but now those efforts are increasing, and it's getting a little ugly. Dr. Fauci and Peter Daszak and the EcoHealth Alliance have been resisting these efforts, various efforts, but now those efforts are increasing, and it's getting a little ugly, which again is really bad because it shouldn't be political. It should just be about finding the outbreak of the origin, if we can, and that starts with China, but it also includes looking at our own relationships in our own labs.
Yeah, of course, the goal is to get to the answer. Listen, this is COVID-19. We're in 2021 and still have questions about how this originated. To speak to the investigation, is there any indication that the politicization will not overtake Congress, the administration's goal of finding out how this started, or is this off to the races on politics primarily?
You know, Victor, that's really a great question because it's been politicized from the jump, and everybody who's been following this knows that it's been politicized from the jump, and it's really hard to unpoliticize something once it's politicized. But here's what I'll tell you from my own reporting, and this is new. The Biden administration is taking a very hard look at this, okay? We saw April Haynes testify that the intelligence community is looking into both theories, the lab accident theory and the natural origin theory. So the Biden administration is open to the idea. They're trying to avoid making it more political. They haven't figured out how to do that yet, but I think you'll see more on that in the coming weeks. Also, there's a bill by Senator Menendez and Senator Risch to demand that the State Department release the intelligence. In other words, the U.S. government is sitting on a bunch of this information. Forget about Fauci for a second. Anthony Blinken and Jake Sullivan and all these guys have this information, and it seems like it should be released, and so we should be able to try to get to the bottom of what actually happened, so that again we can prevent the next pandemic, which is in everyone's interest.
Yeah.
The U.S. government is sitting on a bunch of this information. Forget about Fauci for a second. Anthony Blinken and Jake Sullivan and all these guys have this information, and it seems like it should be released, and so we should be able to try to get to the bottom of what actually happened, so that again we can prevent the next pandemic, which is in everyone's interest.
Yeah.
Is there something that Dr. Fauci or NIH is not being forthcoming about? Is there something that Dr. Fauci or NIH is not being forthcoming about?